Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 6th annual membership for the online chapter. My name is Suzanne Koster. I am one of the 3 presidents for the online chapter. As a reminder, our presentation is for educational purposes only, and that no recommendations are intended, and we hope you enjoy our broadcast. This evening, we'll begin with our annual meeting, our election of directors, and our portfolio contest, and then we're delighted to offer our educational program. Jackie Cummings Koski is a financial educator and consultant, and she'll share with us a money journey that began with a club and continues with a little fire. So the online chapter overview. Let's take a look at what's happened in the last year. Our online chapter has over 3,000 members. It's the largest chapter in Better Investing. We have over 200 clubs. We offer 2 online model clubs. We include 35 states and territories. We have 17 volunteers and 3 BIVAB directors on our board. This year's accomplishments. We've offered educational programs every odd month with guest speakers. We do have 2 online model clubs, and they're open to the public to both see and join. We support our membership by celebrating our milestone clubs. We tailor educational programs to club visits, and all the club visits are complimentary, included in your membership, and done by one of our wonderful volunteers. In our communication, we have an open forum that's hosted on Zoom and is also simultaneously live streamed on Facebook. The recordings are on our YouTube channel. We also offer a monthly newsletter that is sent to all members and guests. We have a partnership. We've joined the consortium webinar, and we've done stock investing made easy. We also has offered our portfolio contest, which we'll hear about the results this evening. Clubs and individuals compete with the best portfolio to build interest and share best practices. It really is a fun and exciting thing. This is our 3rd year offering it, and we'd encourage you to join our 4th year one, and there'll be details on how to join our portfolio contest. It's free to enter. We've had 42 anniversary clubs this year, and you can see our breakout here. We've had a club that's 65 years old, a club that's 60 years old. And sometimes I ask the clubs, what's their success? You know, how do they get to be 60 years? Usually there's no original members left, but they have brought in new members over time. So it's really rewarding to see the longevity of some of our clubs. We do club visits. And the club visits are educational. They can be just a coffee chat. They can be pretty much anything you want. We've visited these clubs here on the red box. There's 9, and we have 5 more club visits coming. We do still have room in the schedule between now and December 31st. If your club would like a club visit, just drop us a note in the message box, and we'll get back to you. And what happens during a club visit? Well, you can have a portfolio conversation. You could have an educational session. We can celebrate your milestone 5, 10, 15, 20 years. We can help you provide operational tips for your clubs. And sometimes we just have a coffee chat. Maybe you'd like to just have a few questions. We offer all of these virtually. Occasionally, if we're in your area and we have a volunteer, we can come live to a meeting, but we found that everybody prefers the Zoom meetings. It seems most convenient and easy for all. If you're interested, you can contact us at that contact@online.betterinvesting.net, or you can drop us a note in the message box. Next year's goals. Our mission is to align with the Better Investing mission and support our members and clubs located in areas that are not served by local on-the-ground clubs. We engage and support our clubs and members. We offer educational programs. We have communication, including our newsletter. We're part of the consortium. We have an online model clubs too. We have a portfolio contest. We do club visits. We mentor all young clubs, and young clubs to us are any club that is less than 5 years. We do club networking, and we recruit and train volunteers. If you'd like to volunteer, drop us a note in the message box. And our current volunteers, this wouldn't be anything without the volunteers. So thank you very much to our current volunteers. including our board of directors and our volunteer members. And volunteers can be as little as 1 hour a month or as much as, I think Bob is our super volunteer, maybe 30 days in a month. Anyway, thank you very much to our volunteers. Without you, this chapter would not run. We would like to take a minute to recognize Avi Horwitz. Avi and I started in the New York chapter, and he was truly a mentor. Avi is a force not just for the online chapter, who he mentored and supported, but 6 other chapters. He was on the board of directors. He helped the educational programs. He started the consortium. And to say that he will be missed is not even enough. So we recognize Avi, and we are very sad about his passing. If you'd like to become a volunteer, and we talked briefly about it before, you can submit your volunteer application by clicking on the link or dropping us a note in the message box. And a volunteer is someone who wants to help contribute to the chapter's education mission. And after you're a volunteer for a year or so, maybe you'd like to become an associate volunteer, take on more responsibility. And after that, if you want to become involved in the leadership and management of the chapter board, much like myself and the others you'll hear from this evening, then you'd be elevated to director. So if you're at all interested or just even curious, drop us a note. We'd love to hear from you. And if you would like to we already talked about that, so I'm sorry, that's a little bit of a redundant slide. Or you can contact us at the email address you saw there. And now it's time for our election of directors. We have 3 open director seats open for this evening. But here is our current BIVAB directors. It's Howard Johnson, and we're pleased that he's on our online chapter board as well as BIVAB. He supports us in many, many things. Bob Houle, who I think most people know Bob, and he is our super volunteer. Both Bob and Howard were awarded the George A. Nicholson Distinguished Service Award. And Jane, who was our original regional manager, and she is a director, and she is also chapter support and our regional liaison. So we are very pleased to have these 3 dynamic people on our board. We are also very excited to say we have a new regional mentor, Kent DeYoung. He was been a BetterInvesting member since 1998, and he's an educator. And so we are very pleased to have him join the online chapter as our regional mentor. These are our continuing directors, and we're pleased that we have these 6. It's Ernie Felzani, it's myself, Suzanne Koster, Dan Perlman, who you'll hear from in just a minute, who runs our portfolio contest, Isla Barnes, Sriram Matabushi, and Chris McCarron, who you will also hear from this evening as she introduces our guest. And now we have our election of directors. Up for election is Jay Eagleson, Phil Sidori, and Jack Finn. Their bios are right here. And now we're going to open up the poll. And how we're going to open up the poll is if you are a member of the online chapter, you are eligible to vote. And we'd ask you to drop a note in the message box, just yes or no, that you vote for the slate of those 3 directors that you saw on the prior slide. So we'll give you just a moment to vote. Actually, I guess that the poll is popping up on your screen, so that's a little change. So if you see the poll, if you'd vote on the poll, that would be fabulous. We'll give everyone just another minute. Okay, let's close the poll, please, Jay. Thank you. And so fabulous, our directors are now elected for another 3-year term each. And so thank you very much for voting out there. Okay, and now I'm pleased to introduce Dan Perlman. He has run our chapter portfolio contest for the last 3 years. It is he you're emailing your contest application and the stocks you're choosing, and again in February. It is also Dan that provides us the monthly updates. And so now I'd like to introduce Dan Perlman. Okay, Dan, take it away.
Thank you. First of all, I just want to reiterate what was on the first slide, that we developed this to build interest among club members and in BI, and to share best practices, and I think also to have a little bit of fun. Also, I want to say that interested parties are invited to enter the next year's contest, 2025-26. If you go to the OLC webpage, I believe it's under news articles, or if you read Innerspire, there's usually a notice in Innerspire about how to register. Well, from September 2024 to the end of July 2025 was a bit of a roller coaster for the stock market. Between the beginning of September and April, the S&P dropped 8%, and then it rebounded. So it rebounded 19%, so that it ended the year up about 11% from its September 1 starting point. I'm pleased to indicate that the average portfolio gained more than the S&P 500 by about 5,000, by about 1%. And I modeled this over 20 years, and over 20 years, a $100,000 portfolio gaining 1 more percent at this level of the growth in 24-25 would have come to $975,000, almost $1 million. I'm pleased that we had 4 really strong portfolios this year that gained more than 50% during the year, and I'm going to work upward from them. You've already heard a good deal about Bob Hoyle, and he had a portfolio that gained 151,000, and I just want to echo that he is a volunteer extraordinaire. Tonight, he's managing the GoToMeeting technology. Tom Martins had an individual portfolio as well. Individuals and clubs can join, and he had one that was 152,000 at the end. And then I want to give a special shout out to Let It Ride investors of Carson Valley. Perhaps they're the most consistent port contest entrant that we've had. They were the winners in 2023, and now they're back with another sterling performance. And drum roll, the final that I want to introduce is the True Rivers Investment Group, which had a gain. I think the 291 is a little too high. I think that it was 219 that they had as their final amount. So that's a gain of 119%, or more than double what they started with at 100,000. And we are now inviting Lee Hamby to acknowledge the success of his investment group. So I'll turn things over to Lee.
I'm not sure if I see Lee out there, Dan.
Okay. He said he was going to be here. Well, I will say just a little bit about his portfolio. Basically, he had a portfolio, that group had a portfolio of 4 stocks. And what it really illustrates is the power of what one particularly strong stock can do. They had Plantar, and Plantar is one of these AI companies that mines data and helps organizations manage big data sets. And it just went up, I believe, 5 times during the course of the year, and really was the single biggest impetus to their success. But I think if you look at portfolios, you can have a couple of losers, you can have you can have stocks that, make a reasonable gain, but often what really sparks a portfolio is having a small set of really big winners. And that was the case in this one. So I'm very sorry that Lee isn't here, and I'm not quite sure why, but uh, that's what I wanted to say. And again, I invite people to enter either as clubs or as individuals for the 24-25 contest. And these are the core rules. $100,000 of virtual money, not real money. Choose between 4 and 7 stocks. The contest runs from September 1 to July 31st, because that allows us to honor the winning portfolio at this meeting. And the submission deadline is the 31st of August. Thank you very much. And if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you very much, Dan. I'll ask Bob if there's any questions out there about the portfolio contest at this time.
None that I can see.
Okay. So I wanted to share two things about the portfolio contest. The stock that Dan was talking about is Palantir. The ticker is PLTR. If you take a look at it, you'll see just the outrageous run it's had this last year. And the second thing that I wanted to say was every single month you'll get emailed, not only your submission, but everybody's submission, and you'll be able to see everybody else's portfolio. So besides getting to enter, and it's a lot of fun to join this contest, you also get to take a look at what everybody else has been selecting and how their portfolios are doing. You also get one chance in February to cycle out of some of the stocks that you've chosen in September. And for my club, and my club has participated, though we are not in the top 4. And it's been really refreshing for my club because we sort of get to think out of the box. We get to choose stuff that doesn't necessarily follow the better investing way. It doesn't have to have earnings. We're only trying to pick something for the next 11 months. So, and it's really sparked a lot of conversation and interest. So if your club's looking for something just a little bit different, or maybe you as an individual, I suggest that you enter. It is free, and all you have to do is send an email to that contact at online.betterinvesting.net. Okay. Here's some of our chapter resources. Again, we do have a Facebook page. We do have a YouTube channel. On the chapter website, you can go to your chapter and you'll see things for volunteers. You'll see events that we're holding, which is usually a monthly meeting, as well as educational sessions. We do have a monthly newsletter that you should be receiving in your inbox, and we have a video library. This is our email. The other thing that I encourage you to do is do go on the Better Investing website and make sure that we have the correct contact information for you. As well as those people in your club, if you're in a club. Often we've been having some not great emails and they get bounced back. So if that's happening, then you're not getting the newsletter, you're not getting the information about the educational sessions. We did mail a card to everybody and asked everybody to do that. So if you're on this call, you could pass the word, that would be fabulous. So thank you. Okay, any questions questions out there that we can answer, Bob?
None here. You just might want to remind everybody to download the handouts, Jackie's program and tonight's program.
Oh, yes, that's correct. If you take a look in handouts, you can get a copy of both the PDF of this evening's presentation, as well as the presentation that Jackie is about to make. She does have a handout as well, so I'd encourage you to download both of those handouts. At this time, I will open I'll open the microphone to any of our other directors that would like to say anything. We do have a few minutes before we introduce Jackie and I turn it over to Chris. So any of our directors out there that do have access to their microphone, is there anything that you'd like to add for this evening's annual meeting? Okay, So what I'll do then is I will turn this over to Chris. So Chris McCarron is one of our three presidents. We have three presidents for the online chapter currently. She is also the educational program lead. She is the person that has the open microphone, and she is our event host for this evening. So let me welcome Chris McCarron, and she, I'm sure, has a few words to say. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you, Suzanne. Welcome, everyone. I know you're all excited to hear from Jackie, but first I just want to quickly let you know what we do here in the Online Chapter Education Committee in case you're thinking you might like to volunteer sometime. We put on a program on the third Wednesday of every odd month, 8:30 Eastern Time, which educates anyone who's attending about something related to stock investing. We've had all kinds of different speakers, from people talking about ways to invest in cryptocurrency to people talking about different analytical tools and all different sorts of things. So even if you don't want to volunteer, please consider popping in on us on the third Wednesday of every odd month. You will find the link in the Online Chapters newsletter, or you can always put a note in the chat and we can give you that link to register, and that registers you for all the meetings. And now, without any further ado, I would love to welcome our wonderful guest, Jackie Cummings Koski. She is a CFP and AFC, a financial educator and a consultant, and she's on the BetterInvesting Board of Directors. If you don't know Jackie, she is best known for reaching FIRE, which, if you're not familiar, is financial independence, retire early, in her 40s, while making less than six figures. So people think if you're going to reach FIRE, you've got to be making millions of dollars, but in fact, she was not. Her fascinating story has been featured in the Rachael Ray Show, CNBC, MarketWatch, and other major media platforms. Her journey to building wealth and understanding investments began with joining a BI investment club in Cincinnati, Ohio in 2008. She was a club member for over 12 years and served as president and vice president. She joined the OKI Tri-state Chapter board in 2009 and currently serves on the BetterInvesting National Board of Directors. She's been a keynote speaker at BINC and presented at national and chapter BI events. She's the author of two books, Fire for Dummies, which was featured in the May 2024 BI magazine, and Money Letters to My Daughter. She's co-host of the Catching Up to FI or FI podcast that helps late starters on the journey to financial independence. The weekly show has reached over 1 million downloads, putting it in the top 1% of podcasts worldwide. Jackie holds the Certified Financial Planner and Accredited Financial Counselor credentials, and she's earned her master's degree in financial planning and financial literacy from Kansas State University. You can learn more about Jackie on her link tree, and I'm going to just put that in the chat for everybody. And now let's turn it over to Jackie. Thank you so much for joining us, Jackie. We're so excited to hear from you.
Hey, thanks a lot, Chris. Thank you guys. You guys are running a nice meeting here. I'm just so glad to be a part of it. And I just saw Bob in person in Baltimore, so that was cool. Okay, so I'm going to attempt to share my screen. So give me just a second here. Okay, so I don't want that.
It's a different layout tonight.
Yeah, that's okay. We will figure it out here. So, okay. So I don't want my Chrome tab. I would like, I guess I have to do my entire screen and then go to, no, it doesn't want me to do that. Oh, I see. Okay, hold on. Okay, yeah, so it's got me, it's not a Chrome tab that I want. I want to share my PowerPoint. So I guess I have to do my entire screen and then go to my presentation. I'm going to attempt to do that, you guys. So let's try it.
Okay.
So are you seeing my screen?
We are with the side slides on the left. Oh, there you go. Perfect.
Okay, are you seeing the full screen presentation mode?
Yes, we are.
Okay, wonderful. So it worked. Yay. So yeah, I was so glad that BI created an online chapter. After COVID happened, it was much needed. And I think you guys do so much great stuff. I may just submit for a presentation topic for your YouTube channel as well. I love that you guys are doing that. Okay, so for the presentation tonight, please, if you have questions, stop me. I love it to be a conversation, and that's one of the great benefits to having a smaller group. So here we go. Just a disclaimer, at the very end, I mention a few stocks, but obviously those are for education and information purposes only, not giving any specific recommendations. And we, as being BI members, know that we should always do our own research. So I like to start every session the same way because a lot of us didn't know about investing, didn't know anything about personal finance when we were young, and even when we became an adult until we made some mistakes. So I feel like it starts when we're very young and they are starting to offer and require personal finance in high schools. And I think that's a great start. There was just a recent write up about an organization called Next Gen Personal Finance, which is ngpf.org, but they track what states and schools are requiring personal finance, and they're behind a lot of the legislation that happens to get these laws passed. And they just had this great article about, since I was in Baltimore, it's so funny, but Prince George's County in Maryland had this wonderful write up about their county and what they're doing with financial education. But anyway, I thought that was kind of timely. So I have a question for you guys. Put it in the chat if you think you know the answer to this. But as of August 2025, how many states require a standalone personal finance course in order to graduate from high school? Now, this is a standalone semester long personal finance course, which I think is the best way to do it. So, anybody have any guess how many states now require it? The hint is that we are making some progress. So when we were normally when I ask this question in a room full of people, people are generally pessimistic. I get numbers like 3 and 5 and just really, really low, but we have made some progress. So I'm not looking in the chat, but do we have any good guesses? I know somebody probably got close. So I'm going to go ahead and reveal it. It is 29 states. So at this point, we have over half of the states that do require personal finance. That is a start. And these personal finance courses, they do include investing. And this is where you, as BI members, people that hold a lot of knowledge when it comes to investing, maybe you have a teacher in your community that you know of that teaches this topic, your knowledge could be very, very helpful. They have curriculum, actually, some really good curriculum out there to help teachers actually learn more about any of these topics that they are not comfortable with. And I think, you know, investing tends to be one of those that a lot of people are afraid of. Okay, let's see. What state are you in? Let's see if your state is included. So this is in alphabetical order, and these are the 29 states. So most of them are in the south or the eastern part of the US. The newest ones, which was very notable, was California. But this is a big deal because finally our young people will start to get some of this knowledge early on in their life. And for most of us, we didn't get this knowledge early on. Okay, I just always like to point that out. Some people think it's offered in every school in the US, and it's just not. Should be. Okay, so this is me, a person that did not get this financial education growing up. So these are just some of these like misnomers or things that I believed when I was young. I believed that no one around me invested. So everyone lived paycheck to paycheck. So this is what I thought was the norm. And then when I started my first real job out of college, I hated putting money in my retirement account because it didn't feel like my money. And as you know, when we ask people in a room who who is an investor, a lot of people won't even raise their hand. And then if you ask a second question to say, how many people are and or has a 401k? And everybody will raise their hand, or most people, and they don't even realize that they are actually investing. Your workplace retirement account is investing. And so I felt like it wasn't my money, and many young people feel this way. I didn't understand how to invest, and I just hated it because thought I was handing over money to my employer. Well, now of course I'm much wiser thanks to a lot of the stuff I learned with the wise people in my BI club and the whole community. So lastly, my lack of investment education came to light when I got divorced in my 30s. I was really like dumbfounded when I realized that my husband had $100,000 more in his 401k than I had in mine. I had $20,000. He had $120,000. I had no idea. I didn't know what I was investing in. I never looked at it. We never looked at the stuff together. But this is the lack of education that I had growing up. Now, if I knew more, maybe even knew about, better investing, I would have done some things a lot sooner. But, think about when you were young, the things that you didn't know, and possibly the next generation, they don't know these things either. And you might be able to influence them in some way by educating them on the things that you have learned. So perhaps they won't have to wait so long. Okay, so I talk about my story a little, and no matter what group I'm talking to, my story always includes these things. I did grow up in poverty, and I was raised by a single dad with 6 kids. So, learning how to invest, it opened up the whole world to me, but it also says that these days, investing is not a rich man's game. Anyone can invest. So, growing up in poverty doesn't mean that you can't still learn this stuff. And then I talk about, my wake up call during my divorce, which I just mentioned. And then my very first step, so number 3 is probably the most important. My first step when I woke up and said, I need to do something different with my finances. I was afraid of investing and I didn't want to be afraid anymore. That's what prompted me to look for an investment club. I was talking to a friend on the phone. She was working in Boston and I was here in Ohio. And somehow we got to talking about stocks. I didn't know what I was doing. It was right around maybe the dot-com bubble or shortly after that. And she was like, yeah, there's a nonprofit organization called Better Investing, and they've got investment clubs all over. You should Google it. And at the time we Googled, we didn't really use AI back then. And when I Googled it, I found the Cincinnati Model Investment Club. So that was the turning point for me. And then finally, after doing all these things that I learned in the investment club, and it wasn't just about how to manage a portfolio. There was just so many broad things that I learned, and I'll talk about those a little bit later. But 10 years after joining this investment club, I reached financial independence. And then 2 years later, I retired early and I had $1.3 million. And this was like this, confetti moment, like the bells and whistles are going off. And it's just crazy that learning about investing and how important that was and putting a framework around, growing your wealth, it just started to make sense. But I would have never imagined that I would have been in middle class or even made it to the point where I was able to retire early. So these are like just the main points I always talk about anytime I'm interviewing with anybody. And this is just the high level summary. So this is the money part of what I learned from my investment club. So I started visiting in 2007. So this was sort of the calm before the storm before 2008 happened. But that just was my, should luck have it, that's when I started learning. I went to I was a single mom at this point. So I went to, over the course of 6 months, I think I went to 3 or 4 different meetings. They met monthly. And I eventually joined in 2008 because I'm like, these are super smart people and they know what they're doing. I want to be a part of it. So in our model club, the maximum we were able to contribute was $100 a month. So I made sure I did that every month, and then I would put in a little bit more if like a partner would leave, and then their portion would be available to the remaining members. So I did make extra contributions because I kind of felt like I was behind with that because everybody that had been in the club had been in for years, and I was just starting. Um, by the time, so I would have been an active member in that club from 2008 to 2019, the year that I retired. And at that point, I had about $30,000. So over the course of 12 years, I ended up with $30,000 in this club. And that was the first pot of money that I used after I retired in 2019. I actually remained in the club maybe like 2 years after that. So I made withdrawals, as a partner, but it was kind of cool, that, slow and steady wins the race. And I had clear and free access of this money with no age limit because since I retired so early, I wasn't 59 and a half, so it wasn't easy to get, money out of some of my retirement accounts. But this is what I learned about the money part. But I think what's more important is like these other like mindset gems that I took away from the club. So the first thing was the power of compound growth. I guess I kind of knew what that was, but it just wasn't making much sense to me. But when you're in the investment club, the main thing you want to do is you want to get growth from your portfolio. And then thinking long term, it was just such a powerful thing. And I started questioning myself and saying, why am I not like taking advantage of this compound growth and investing and maxing out, my other accounts, my 401k, my IRA, my, health savings account. I can invest in that. So the value of compound growth was a really big lesson. The next one was always be curious and do your research. And I remember this so well because when I first started, I barely knew what I was doing. And we'd be doing the SSGs, and someone would say, you have to put your judgment in there. And I'm thinking, well, I don't have a judgment. I barely know what I'm doing, right? But they still push me to say you have to come up with a judgment. But even there's no right or wrong, but you have to be the one to think through this. Yeah, we can kind of give you the answer. We could tell you what it probably should be, but you have to have your own judgment. So you have to be curious and do your own research, which is what we put in the disclaimer in front of every presentation that we do. So I also learned, well, I was so inspired by the smart people in the club. We not only had the meetings, but after every meeting, we would go to a restaurant and we would continue just talking about all kinds of stuff that just helped me, I guess, focus a little bit more on the thing that I was interested in the most. And it was not being afraid of the stock market, learning how to invest and things like that. So they became friends as well, not just club members. So this community and friendships was a very big deal to me, and I still stay in touch with most of the people that were in my club. We still go to lunch. I still try to go to meetings. So it's fun, and I enjoy it, and I am so happy that the friends with the friends that I made and the community that we had as a club. I learned that you cannot save your way to wealth. You have to invest. And I tell people that all the time. I think I was probably too conservative before I started learning what I learned in the club, and I wanted to keep it in safe stuff, which is partly why my 401k was less than my husband's. So yeah, you just have to invest. The risk will always be there. That's the nature of an investment. But this is a theme that resonates with me so much, and I share it all the time. And then like I mentioned before, I applied that knowledge to all of my other investing, in my retirement account and things like that. Maybe I didn't have access to do individual stocks, but I certainly could do a mutual fund or index funds, and the underlying components were stocks. So I was always, from being in the club, I always have had a bent towards growth. So yeah, you have the S&P 500 index or this total stock market, but I always looked for like a growth index fund. And then because of 2008, I learned this huge lesson: no matter what, just keep investing. And 2008 was my initiation into staying the course and keep investing. I barely knew what I was doing, but the people in the club were like, this is a great time to start. You need to, continue doing what you're doing. And I just wasn't afraid because I was around smart people that knew what to do when the market went down. And, the same thing happened during COVID. 2022, the market was down. And then most recently, with the tariffs, I think back in April, the market, dropped, really, really quickly in a short period of time. And people got very, very scared. And, for me, nothing felt worse than 2008. So I was okay. And I tried to encourage as many people as I could to stay the course. But these are the 7 gems that were so valuable to me that had nothing to do with the hard numbers. And I know that all of you probably have some of these takeaways. Okay, so I wanted to show some of my real numbers, which is what people seem to really like. Just lay people that are just wondering how to put all this stuff together. But before I do that, do we have any questions? If not, I will continue.
None yet.
Okay, sounds great. I can't see the screen, so I wanted to just pause for a second. All right, so I think for the average person, and we are all educators, right? So people know that we have this extra knowledge when it comes to financial education, investing education, and things like that. And they come to us with questions. And I think people often have so much trouble trying to put all the pieces together. So I share my numbers openly in the hopes that it will help someone else make sense of it all. So when I tell people that I retired at 49, they're like, "No way! How can you do that?" And they want to they're just so curious about the numbers. So I'm like, okay, I'll share the numbers. I don't have any trouble with that. So this is what my salary and expenses were. So the first thing is I made about $80,000 a year gross income. So it immediately says I wasn't a huge high income earner. In the US, making over $100,000, boy, you've made it. But I never made over $80,000. I wasn't trying to climb the corporate ladder. And I did realize that my strength was more so doing more with the money that I had versus trying to, climb the corporate ladder and earn more money or to be job hopping to earn more money. But I made about $80,000 a year. I had about $2,000 in other income. I proactively decided to keep my debt going into retirement, which is a highly debated topic. I feel like you just need whatever your decisions are, be mindful about it and make sure you do your research, just like I learned with Better Investing. So for me, I had a very low interest rate. I live in a low cost of living area, so my mortgage payment is still only like $1,200 a month. So it was very reasonable to me. Now, if I had, a $4,000 a month mortgage payment, I might have thought a little differently about it. But I proactively decided to continue paying my mortgage off as agreed. Then my annual expenses was between $40 and $45,000 a year, and I did that comfortably. My FI number, which stands for financial independence, that number is just 25 times your annual expenses. And I really appreciate a simplistic framework. So this 25 times your expenses to reach your financial independence number is just the inverse of the 4% rule, because once you accumulate 25 times your expenses, then on the back end, you can take off 4% every year adjusted for inflation. Even though I reached that FI number, though, that 25 times my expenses, I wasn't ready to retire yet. So I worked another 2 years. I was able to accumulate a little bit more. I had more of a cushion, and I got to 30 times my expenses, which was the one around the $1.3 million. So this was what my salary and expenses look like. And I always point out these two things. The main difference is, even though I was making $80,000 a year, I was only spending a little over half of that, 45,000. So is there any questions about this? All right. Okay, so the next
No,
set of
not yet.
uh-oh. Is there a question?
No, ma'am.
All right. Okay, so this next one is my saving and investing. This is where I think my strength lies, right? Not I wasn't the best budgeter. I'll go ahead and admit that. Um, but saving and investing, oh, that was my thing. So at first, while I was married, I was saving about 10%. Why? Because that's what everybody told you to do. Either get the company match and do 10%. So that's what I did. So the $20,000 that I had, that was a result of that. Now, I moved that to a 40% savings rate by the time I started figuring some of this stuff out. And then this is what made up that 40% savings. And the savings rate, most of you guys probably know, but it's just whatever your gross income is, what percent of that are you saving? So now this was 2019. So I was maxing out my 401k. I was getting an extremely generous company match. And if I put in 7%, the company put in 9%. And then I was maxing, going all the way up to the IRS limit. Okay, and then I was also maxing out my Roth IRA. That was about $6,000. And of course, all these numbers got adjusted for inflation. And then I'm not sure if many people are familiar with a health savings account, an HSA, but that is basically if you're on a high deductible plan, you can have a health savings account. And I got contributions from my employer. I put in my own, and these were new. My company started offering them up in 2008. Another thing that helped me a lot. And I was maxing it out every year to the family maximum. And it was kind of new, so no one at work was really able to answer my questions. Like the benefits department couldn't help me, and I started doing a lot of digging on my own. So I kind of supersized this health savings account. Like I looked at the balance today, and it just reached $250,000. So I've got $250,000 in my health savings account, and all I did was max it out every year. And I never really took anything out. I just paid out of pocket, and I let my money grow, and I was just invested in like an S&P 500 index fund, or a growth index fund is probably what I was leaning towards. So there's that. And then of course I was putting money in my investment club, but this is where all of my saving and investing was going. I did have the emergency fund and all that, so I don't have that here because I had already gotten to the number that I needed, which was about 6 months worth of living expenses. But what I point out here is that even though I started at 10%, it still was something. And so by the time I was figuring this out, I didn't start at zero. So it was very, very helpful to have something. And then I moved that all the way up to a 40% savings rate. So we got any questions? Or I'm hearing a little bit of feedback. I don't know if anybody else is hearing that.
Well, actually, we have one about your CFP practice. And do you take the same information and provide that to your clients?
Okay, so I do hold the CFP credential, Certified Financial Planner. I got that after I retired. And the way that I use my CFP is not for one-on-one financial planning, which is what is typical. I call myself a financial educator that holds the CFP credential. I primarily do one-to-many financial education. I do a little bit of one-on-one. Mostly one-on-one I do is like maybe helping people understand their 401k, walking them through that, or maybe, someone that's, you know, uh, on their journey to financial independence and they want to set a second look. I'll do something like that. But I certainly don't mind sharing this with anyone. I share it publicly. Mostly it's a group of people. I've even done videos, interviews, and things like that where I share all of these numbers. But it is unheard of for a CFP to share their number. So probably no CFPs are doing this. I can tell you that. So yeah,
Thank you.
anything else?
No, that's it.
Okay, wonderful. We'll keep rolling. Now,
Oh, no, didn't hear anybody.
okay. Okay, so obviously all of that saving, it doesn't just go into a black hole. So it does just flow into your net worth. So here's how my net worth broke out. So no surprise that most of my net worth is tied up in my 401k because that's where I was saving the most. And that has had the larger limits that I could max out. Then my single stock portfolio. So my single stock portfolio is within a traditional IRA. And I'll show you a little bit more of that later. But that grew, and this is probably one of the accounts that I've had the longest. And then my health savings account, I was telling you how big that is. This is from 2019. I think at the time I retired, it was probably had a balance of around 200,000 or something like that. Then my home equity, even though I'm still making payments, it's probably got about 80% equity in there. It's just about paid off. And then my Roth IRA, there's that. And then I have this tiny little company pension. I'm in that generation where mostly if you got a pension, it probably was frozen, so it doesn't represent much. And then there was my stock investment club. And then I had a paid off car. So this is what my net worth looked like when I retired in 2019. For me, that's pretty impressive. Like I said, I would have never thought that I got to that kind of net worth. So we all know that that doesn't happen overnight. So I love to show this little timeline here from the time of my divorce to where I started joining an investment club through the OKI chapter. As you can see, it's not a straight line. You see that 2008, everything that I was building toward, boom, it went down in 2008, but then it kept up, for nearly 10 years. We did have another big dip in 2022, and my net worth went down by about 21%. Now, that did not feel good. No matter how experienced we are as investors, nobody likes to see red in their portfolio. But this was, I was grabbing my heart on that one, but I knew it would come back long term. The market always comes back, but it had me questioning. I'm like, oh my God, I think I retired at like the exact wrong time. So there's that 2022. And all of you, I'm sure, have done a net worth statement, but if you're ever working with anyone or doing education, in the chapter, uh, net doing a net worth statement is so valuable. You're pulling together all these accounts that you may have forgotten about and things like that. And for me, doing a net worth statement was like one of the most valuable exercise I've ever done with my finances. So I really, really love doing this exercise. I wish I would have known how to do it earlier, but before I got divorced, I didn't even know what a net worth statement was. So this is another staying the course slide. So recently I did an update. I said, you know what, let me take a look at my um, net worth since I retired. I retired in 2019, so it's been 6 years. And so here's what it looks like since I retired. Now I have been withdrawing money from my retirement account. Every year has been a little bit different, but I have been withdrawing, from my portfolio. There was only 1 year that I didn't have to, but at least partially, I need to get money out of my accounts. So this is from 2019 to July 2025. And even though I am taking money out, I retired with 1.3 million. And as of July 2025, 6 years later, it's nearly double, 2.1 million. Kind of shocking when I looked at that, right? But, if your money is growing at a faster rate than inflation and a faster rate than what you're pulling off, that's what happens. And when I was doing my projections for my withdrawal on the back end, I didn't even include Social Security. So I feel probably more confident now than I did when I was approaching this whole thing, because everyone's biggest fear is that you run out of money. And now I feel pretty confident that that's very unlikely. I mean, anything can go crazy, but it's pretty unlikely. And I can only say this 6 years later when, Social Security is probably less than 10 years away from me. So this was another example of how important staying the course is. So let's take a look at this. Financial independence, retire early. Now, I see a lot of parallels in the FIRE community and the BI community. So it is a hot new acronym, but it's really not that new. You guys are going to be able to recognize a lot of these characteristics and a lot of these tenets of FIRE. So the concept, so FIRE is a new acronym, but the concept behind it is not. So, and I'll tell you why. So FIRE just speeds up the process. Um, and I'm sure you all have heard some version of this. Live on less than you earn and invest the difference. So that is what FIRE is, except you're speeding up the process. So to make it super simple for anyone, like if I had to write this on the back of a napkin, and if someone asked me the question, and they often do, so how do you build wealth? And I'll say you need to increase these three things: your income, your savings, and your investing. And then you need to decrease these three things: debt, taxes, and expenses. And just having some kind of very high level framework, they can process it a little bit easier. So this is kind of how I do it, super simple. All of you guys probably have a version of this. Am I pretty right on with this? I think you guys would agree. So
Very much.
yeah, and I just think some people, they do try to make it more complex than it needs to be. But if you start with a broad concept like this, we can fill in the gaps. Okay, so the FIRE movement is a little bit different. I think this touches more on the psychological side of things. So it's more about buying your time back so that you can do what you love much sooner than you ever imagined. For me, I started doing financial education probably about 5, maybe 10 years before I retired, but I never imagined that I would be able to leave that day job and actually focus on financial education, because that's what really lit me up. That's what I really wanted to do, but I never thought I'd be able to make money off of it or make a living from it. And to know that I didn't have to necessarily make a living for it, long as I built up my investments and my nest egg, or that would support me, I didn't have to worry so much about how can I make money off of this. But we know that's how things normally go. So if you think about it, and so many people want this, especially younger people, they love the FIRE movement and they love thinking about stepping away from their day job. And so, not having to rely on a paycheck from a job, it is a powerful position to be in. And it's very attractive to a lot of people. But it does take a little work to get there. You don't have to be a high income earner. You don't have to just be someone that's single with no kids. You can actually do this no matter what. You just have to look at your circumstances. That's what I had to do because, when FIRE was kind of new, I'm listening to, like, mostly it was like highly paid engineers that didn't have any kids. And I was like just the opposite. So I had to look at my specific circumstances and figure out how I could do it. So this concept of the FIRE movement is sort of buying your time back and being able to go after the thing that you're really passionate about and that you really love. So I always tell people, again, they ask me that question, like, how did you really get into this? How did you turn the corner? And I always tell them it's like there's really no FIRE without BI, because that came first. Like, Better Investing was the door that opened for me, that showed me all these other things. And had I not joined this investment club, I don't know how much of this stuff I would have started learning. So I'm just happy that they were there at a moment in my life where I was so ready to receive all of this knowledge. So BI was a big part. It came first. So I want to kind of, I mentioned before that there's a lot of parallels in with the FIRE community and BI. So here are the parallels that I see. Okay, see if this is you. All right, community and connection. So right now, all of the chapters you think about, the BI community, the BINC conference, and all of that. That's really important. A lot of your friends probably are BI people. So the community connections is a huge thing with FIRE movement as well. Education is paramount. You guys do education through your YouTube channel, your meetings, every chapter, the whole thing is about education. For the fire people, it's the same thing. They want a flow of information. That's, I remember when I was first learning about the fire stuff and kind of understanding the framework, there was people that was showing their numbers just like I'm showing mine. And I said, if I ever have the opportunity where I'm able to share my numbers, I would. And so the education part is paramount. And then they love to share and teach, which kind of falls in the same realm, but those are characteristics of both. And then banish the taboo of talking about money. We talk about money in the BI community all the time, and so do fire people. This is what we love. This is what is comfortable, and we're okay talking about it. But in a lot of circles, people don't like to talk about money. And the last one is there are a lot of modest millionaires. I didn't realize that until, you'll have these conversations. They're not the people that's like driving, the 2025 BMW or carrying the Louis Vuitton purses or wearing a bunch of bling bling jewelry. They are modest. They're probably driving a 2015 Camry. They probably have one modest wedding ring, and they don't like to flash their wealth, but they're smart people that are smart with their money, and that is what builds wealth. So there's probably a lot of millionaires amongst us, but there's no need to brag. So these are the things that BI represents and things that the fire community represents. And I kind of like the merging of the two. All right. So sometimes perceptions are very deceiving. Some fire people, the one difference might be that many of them don't invest in individual stocks. Now, I probably do because of what I learned with Better Investing, and I will openly say, um, I think I will always have an individual stock portfolio, and it doesn't have to be all or none. I have index funds and I have an individual stock portfolio. So sometimes both groups might get a bad rap. So this image here. So is this fire? This was ran in the New York Times back in 2024, and it says your neighbors are retiring in their 30s. Why can't you? So that's a very salacious headline, and it's not even what represents the fire movement. But you've got this Lamborghini, and you've got this guy with this flamethrower. It's just, very sensationalist. And the 30s. I mean, that is not typical. Most people in the fire movement, they're 40s, 50s, even 60s sometimes. But we kind of get a bad rap with images like that. Now, on the other side, BI sometimes might get a little bit of a bad rap where if we say we invest in individual stocks, they're thinking Wall Street bets, let's go gamble, throw it all at one of these meme stocks. It's crazy, right? But these media headlines, that are again very salacious, are out there. But perception can be very deceiving sometimes. We are very mindful people that do our research, that use a quality tool to help us with our judgment and decide when we should buy and sell a stock, and we hold for the long term. Just like the fire people, these are mindful people that do their research. They look at their savings rate. They're mindful of their taxes. They're smart with their money, and they are tracking. When will they get to that crossover point where they can live off their portfolio and not have to necessarily depend on the job. So I just like to show these just because, there's some people out there that have these crazy images in their head, that's just not true. So, so we mentioned FIRE, what that stands for, Financial Independence, Retire Early. So I literally wrote the book on FIRE, got with Wiley, or they approached me and did this book called Fire for Dummies. It was in the May 2024 BI magazine. But FIRE is just something that I talk a lot about, mostly from the standpoint of, hey, you don't have to work, pensions are gone. So the incentive to stay at a job for 40 years just is not there anymore. So now that it's in your hands, maybe you can write the script. Maybe you can be the one to say, well, if I'm saving this much, it's going to add up to this much, which means I can cut out sooner than I thought. And just putting it in a mindful, smart, way so that anyone can understand it, even people that grew up poor like I did, to be able to move the needle, get to a point where you are becoming financially literate, you're getting financial education, and hopefully reach the point of where you become financially independent. So I had a few things to say about BI in the book. Again, BI was like all through, my financial knowledge and all through any messages that I sent, including the messages that I sent in the book. So, BI got its place. So I said, before I ever heard of FIRE, I learned about investing in individual stocks through an investment club supported by the Better Investing nonprofit organization. And all of this was on page 198. I was fascinated with being a long-term investor in individual stocks, and I loved doing research on companies with a community of people that was interested in the same thing. And then finally, I think this is where I learned how important community was to my education and growth. So even though I know probably the majority of FIRE people, they're straight up index funds, and that's what they do, and they don't talk much about individual stocks, I just want to make it clear to them that that is how I started learning about the stock market, and kind of how again, this door was open for me. So this
Jackie,
is my,
we do have
yep.
a question.
Okay, let's
Okay,
do
and
it.
this is kind of an important question here. It is, did you involve your children in your investment club, and or sharing your story with income and expenses and the budgeting and savings and investing, and have they developed an interest in themselves in investing
Yeah.
in themselves?
So I have one daughter. Her name is Amber, and the time I was in the investment club, she was a teenager, not too open to come into an investment club with me, but she's 30 years old now. And, we try to teach, the first thing we want to do when we learn something new, we want to teach it to our kids. So, of course, I did do that with her, and some of it stuck, some of it didn't. But the one thing I can say is that she is not afraid of the stock market. She does invest. She understands how important it is to invest in a 401k, and she has an individual stock portfolio. Now, she's doing things in the new generation way. She didn't start with Robinhood, but she loved the idea of like acorns. Acorns made it super simple where every transaction that you make, they would round it up and they would invest the money for you. And then I had started an IRA or a Roth IRA for her. So she continues with that. And I feel comfortable that she has been wise enough with her money. Um, she's not doing everything 100% the way that I would do it, but I let her know that she's her own person, and that's okay. But I am thrilled with the things that she did pick up. And certainly it was always my intention to teach these things to her. And actually, the first book that I wrote, my daughter was, I think, 15 at the time, and it was called Money Letters to My Daughter. And that was my effort to take everything that I learned and be able to pass it on to her. Like I said, she was a teenager, so she wasn't listening to a whole lot I was saying. So I thought I would put it all in a book and memorialize it and have her read it. And I wrote it just in the form of little letters. But that is a really good question, because we're all thinking about legacy here. I don't know when the switch turned on for me, but I am in legacy building mode. I feel like I have done pretty well. I feel, very privileged to have, earned the money that I earned, to be able to save, build wealth, and be able to teach others. And now I'm trying to spread that to, my daughter, my nieces, my nephews, and just the whole world at large as much as I can. So thank you for that question. Now, this is actually my Cincinnati Model Investment Club. Now, this is funny because this was a video I did with MarketWatch, and they were filming on a Sunday. Well, our club met on a Saturday, and it wasn't even the week we meet. So I sent an email. I said, hey, I would really like for part of this video to be a BI investment club meeting. I said, so if anyone would be willing to come in and we do like a mini investment club meeting, it would be great, because I would like him to have footage of this. Because this was part of what I did, because they wanted to just do the stuff that I do all the time. And so I had 8 including myself, there's 8 people that showed up for this this little mini investment club meeting so that we could get footage. So these are good friends right here. So I appreciate that. But these are some of my club members, and they showed up for me. And this was back in 2022, that horrible year in the stock market. So, okay. So what was I invested in? Okay, I get this question all the time. And you guys probably get the question too. And maybe you show them your individual stock portfolio or something like that. But here's how mine was sliced up. And this would have been in 2019 as I was approaching retirement. So I obviously had to have some liquid savings. Now, most people will say, if you're 5 years from retirement, you should have something like a 70-30 or a 60-40 portfolio. So I didn't exactly have that. But here's realistically how I have it. I would think of things in dollars, like how many years worth of expenses did I want to have available so that I wouldn't have to worry about what the stock market was doing. And for that equaled about 10% of my investable assets. So this was a liquid savings account, emergency fund, and all that. That was about 10%. And then I had another 10% that was in a single stock portfolio and my investment club. And then everything else was in a growth stock index fund. So this is how mine split out. Now this has changed a little bit more. Maybe I have a little bit more in liquid, probably a little bit more in my stock index fund because I've actually been paring down some of my individual stocks. And I know some of you guys probably have too many stocks in your portfolios too. So I had way too many, and now I'm selling more than I've been buying. But this is what it looks like. This is what I was invested in. Again, nothing fancy. I don't have any, cryptocurrency. I don't have any gold. But that's okay. And if I do, if I decide to get something that's a little more risky or a little more speculative, I don't necessarily. It's not that I never do that, but if I do it, it's going to be very small. When I say small, it's probably going to be less than 1% of my portfolio. But I'm an investor and I'm curious about new asset classes. I have a couple years ago, I brought a Bitcoin ETF because I was very interested in that, but I hated the idea of having a separate account just to buy Bitcoin. So, okay, and here is, I love to show this difference in what most people do. And when I say most people, maybe it's not you guys because you guys are very, very savvy, but you will find this with your friends and your family. Most of them will, let's see, I'm going to list 3 different assets here. So most people that have a 401k, they stick with the default that their company puts them in. And that's that yellow one. That just as an example, Vanguard 2045 target date fund. That's what the company is usually putting you in, and that's what most people stick with. Or maybe they'll say, you know what, I just want a regular straight up S&P 500 index fund. That's the blue one. And for me, I think from all of my time with BI, I lean towards growth. So I always have like a growth index fund. So here's how each of these 3 have performed over the last 10 years. Okay, so I did a 5-year return and I did a 10-year return. Okay, so in 2024, this was the difference in how each of these did. So the growth fund, the green one, was up 32%. And S&P 500 index fund, that was up 25%, still pretty good. But then the target date, the 2045 target date fund, and 2045, that's 25, 30, that's 20 years from now, right? So that was only 13%. So that's a pretty big difference when you're looking at like the growth fund and the target date fund. Now, target date funds, they're not all created equal, but it looks like this target date fund, they probably had more bonds than I would ever want in there. Then I did the same thing for 5 years. Not quite as far apart, but the theme is the same. Okay, so uh, the growth index fund returned almost double, more than double, than that of the yellow one, the target date fund. And then we're looking at the 10-year return, still about the same thing. So even over in short periods of time and long periods of times, these perform differently. Now, I'm never trying to convince somebody that they should go with the growth index fund because, high risk, high reward. It's a little more volatile, The beta is higher. There's more swings. But over the long term, I've even looked as far as, I think Vanguard has it where I could go out 20 years with that Vanguard uh, growth index fund, and it still performs consistently better than the S&P 5. So that's just, so I, as you know, coming from Better Investing, I do my research. So when I retired, I said, I don't want to have to look at a bunch of different index funds every time I'm ready to get a stock index fund. So I want to find the one that's right for me. And that's what I did. But this is just the difference in those. And again, the difference in what, many people do versus what I have decided to do, and not, pushing that on anyone else, but this is, what I stick with, just an growth index fund. If I'm looking at doing an index fund. Now, I'll share my single stock portfolio a little bit. You guys can judge me. Go ahead. But these are some of my top. Well, let's look at this first. So I told you I have a single stock portfolio. I started in 2004 with it, with $60,000. Now this was the when I got divorced, the retirement accounts were equalized, and I ended up with $60,000. So for that particular account, it's a traditional IRA. I never put any money in and I never took any money out. So it's a very clean representation of how this individual stock portfolio performed. So that was 2004. In July 2005, that single stock portfolio grew to $392,000. I mean, tremendous. And it's so fun to go back and do these exercises because I was very curious about it. And it had about roughly a 10% annualized return. Well, spoiler alert, the S&P 500 returned about the same. But I enjoy having an individual stock portfolio. There are times where this portfolio is performing a lot better than the stock market. And in the early days, I probably didn't do so well because I barely knew what I was doing. But I'm pretty proud of this particular account because it represents, from the time that I was pretty financially ignorant, had $60,000. I suppose I did do some things right. I could have cashed it out. I didn't. I probably should have converted it to a Roth, and that way all this money would be tax free. But anyway, I'm not perfect, but I'm pretty happy to see this is just that magic of compound growth. So I'm happy with that. Now, these are the top holdings in that single stock portfolio, the one that started at 60,000 and now it's 392. So my largest, now I didn't intentionally make NVIDIA my top holding, but it's performed so well to where it is. I started off with something pretty small. I think I've had NVIDIA for about 6 years. So it's performed well. And, we all, have some, you got that rule of five where, one is going to be horrible, one is going to be great, and the rest are kind of going to be the average. But NVIDIA is the top holding right now. And then Berkshire Hathaway. Now, it was my intention to make Berkshire Hathaway my top holding because it's kind of like a mutual fund and it's very diversified already. And then after that is Apple, which has been just okay lately. Adobe, oh, I'm so disappointed with that stuff. I wonder if anybody else owns Adobe, but I'm about ready to get rid of it. I had it for so long. It's still in the positive, but over the last year or two, it's just been horrible. BlackRock, I remember how this, we all have different ways that stocks come onto a radar. This particular one came onto my radar because I was working with a lot of people in their TSP, the Thrift Savings Account, and they obviously have a huge client, which is the federal government and DoD workers. And I'm like, you know what? I wonder who is a custodian for the TSP, and it was BlackRock. So I did my research, and I ended up getting BlackRock. And then here's the other ones. Now these represent about half of my overall portfolio. But then I've got Chipotle, which has done really, really well. I've had that for 10 plus years. And then Cummings has done well as well. So these are just my top holdings, but I can't show the winners unless I show the losers. So here are the losers, guys. We all got them. I I don't know what I was thinking of with some of these. They sounded great at the time and they look great at the time, but Alibaba, oh my gosh, Chegg, Tilray, Teva Pharmaceutical, and Teladoc, all of these were down more than 50% before I said, you know what, I need to cut my losses. But some of these were fairly speculative. Teva was around for a while, but some of these was kind of new. Like that Tilray, that's a cannabis company. So, but many of these were new companies. And like I said, I do sometimes have companies that are a little more speculative, maybe a little more risky. I keep them very, very small. So each of these only represented about 1% of my portfolio. So they weren't huge. And that's how I think about things. It's like I'm okay to take a risk, but if it doesn't work out, I don't want to feel too much pain. But these are my losers. I've had plenty of them, and there'll always be probably something that's not on the plus side of my portfolio. So there, I admitted it. Okay, so this is the thing that I show mostly young people. I don't even give out gifts anymore for like graduations or birthday. I give them this message. I tell them, you're my millionaire. And I say after 40 years, if you save $50 a week, invested in the stock market like an S&P 500 fund, you get a 9% growth. After 40 years, you will have $1 million. And they just love to see that. So that's always my example. You guys might have a number that you use to show this example. So I give them a gift. I give them $50. I used to give them a nice, crisp $50 bill from the bank. But now I just cash app them or I send them Zelle with $50. And then I give them this cute little image where I say, you're my millionaire. Did you know that all you need is to invest $50 a week in the S&P 500 for 40 years and you'll have $1 million. And then on the back of that card, there's this amortization schedule where every year it shows how their money is growing. Because these young people are smart. But this is what I give them now. I don't even mess with, it's hard to keep up with what they want anyway. So there's a QR code that is live. So if you'd like to try using this, they're getting two gifts, right? They're getting the $50 and they're getting the knowledge and understanding the value of compound growth. So I share this all the time. All the kids love it. Even parents love it, and people use this idea all the time. But it's just such a great way to, again, dance around this theme or sort of dangle this carrot of learning about investing as early as you can. So I usually will have some smart nieces and nephews and friends that I'll say, okay, yeah, it normally takes 40 years, but what if you can do it a little bit sooner? What if you could split that time in half and do it in 20 years? I bet you could do it. And they're like, well, how do I do that? And then I'll get into a deeper conversation. I'll use this assumption. This is the assumption that I use, assuming $60,000 a year, which is actually less than the average income in America. And if you have a college degree, $60,000 is very realistic. So I use the example by using a 401k match from your job, but I use the same 9% growth using an S&P 500 fund. You could do that in 20 years. And that's sort of the fire way, doing this a lot sooner. But I just love with these examples of how you can grow your money, just that power of compound growth. Now that pretty much ends the presentation, and we got a couple minutes for questions, but I mentioned the book that came out last year, so it's been around a little bit over a year. And then I do co-host a podcast called Catching Up to Five, and the podcast focuses on late starters that didn't know about money like I didn't. These are people in their 30s, their 40s, even 50s. It's a mix of Gen X and millennials, but it's all about teaching people about personal finance, reaching financial independence, and even when you get a late start, that it is never too late. And here's some things you can do to catch up. We have experts on. We have late starter stories, and it's really fun doing this. My co-host, he was a late starter too, and he is an emergency room physician, and he still had no idea what he was doing for the longest. And he woke up at 50 and barely had anything saved, even though he had a super high income. But there is that. And I'm going to leave you with this. If you'd like to stay in touch, there's my link tree that just gives you all the different things I have going on. And then I'm a corporate girl, so I have a LinkedIn profile. Connect with me there. But I do appreciate so much you guys having me be a part of your annual meeting. And I'm going to turn it back over to you guys, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Well, we do have one more
Jackie,
question.
yeah. Oh, sorry, Bob. Go ahead.
Okay. And what was your most challenging step in your investment journey, and how did you overcome that?
Oh gosh, my most challenging step. Um, I would say, early on when I didn't know anything about investing, it was really a gut punch to me at the time of my divorce when I saw the disparity where I had $20,000 in my retirement account and my husband had 120. Going through divorces, if you know anyone, or if you've been through a divorce, you know how stressful that is, how much anxiety and all the range of emotions that you have. So it took me about 2 years to sort of refocus after that happened to even do anything. And that first step was finding an investment club. And I was just happy to be around people that weren't talking about my divorce, and they were so friendly and so helpful and just waving me in. So that was by far the most challenging piece, was that very beginning.
All righty. Thank you. Over to Chris.
So one other question we had here, and maybe you touched on this with your health savings account. Maybe you've actually answered this question when my computer decided to go to the nether regions. But there's a question here about health insurance, and you've got a health savings account. How does health insurance work with that health savings account, and how does that interact with the way that you take care of your medical expenses and your daughter's medical expense, or when you were taking care of your daughter's medical expenses?
Yeah, so that's a big deal, and that's a great question. That's probably the number one question I get when I talk about retiring early. The main thing is, how do you get health insurance when you're no longer working? Because in the U.S., health insurance is very much tied to a job. Well, the first part is that people retiring early is not the only people that have ever needed health insurance that wasn't tied to a job. Think about entrepreneurs, think about contract workers, think about, independent contractors, people like that. So right now, one of the main things that's available is the Affordable Care Act and getting your insurance off of the exchange. Now, because I don't work a regular job, my income is, I can be flexible with it. I can engineer it to be lower than what it would take me to live off of. So I get a very large subsidy because I don't have, like, if I take out Roth contributions, that's technically not income that gets taxed. So depending on what money I am living on, it may not be taxable, which means that my taxable income looks pretty low where I would qualify for a subsidy. I mean, even if I didn't, I'm totally fine paying whatever the monthly payments are. I just have to build it into the budget. And with my health savings account, what that does is it gives me a peace of mind because one of the number one reasons for bankruptcy in America is healthcare cost or health debt or medical debt. So for me, if anything that I need when it comes to medical stuff, I am able to take money out of my health savings account to cover it completely tax free. And that makes me feel very, very comfortable with handling a big piece of expenses that I used to be very concerned about. So that's kind of how it fits into the picture. Now, when I get older, like Medicare age 65, I can use my health savings account to pay for Medicare premiums. So I guess that kind of does it, but I do get that question all the time. Thank you.
And I think the other questions you have here you've answered, except for the one that says, will you be speaking at the next Better Investing annual conference in Chicago?
I will be at the one in Chicago. I'm not sure what my topic will be. Like last time, I did talk a little bit about the fire stuff. Not quite the stuff that I went over today, but it was about some fire stuff. So I'm going to do something a little bit different. Here's what I've been interested in lately, and perhaps I'll do a presentation on your YouTube channel, get with you guys as well. But I've been kind of mad about, pensions are no longer around. So for most people, the foundation for their retirement is their 401k or their employer sponsored plan. Like it could be a thrift savings account, it could be a 403b, it could be a 457, whatever. And I have looked at so many people's employer sponsored retirement account that it's just a mess. It's got high fees. You can barely understand the funds. It's hard to navigate. And I'm like, we're expecting people to have this as their main resource for retirement and they can barely understand it. So I'm going to start this initiative called the Great 401k Cleanup, where I help teach people how to read their 401k statement. What do you do to get online access? How do you understand the funds? How do you name a beneficiary? Just to say this is huge for most people and their biggest pot of money for retirement. Why are we not giving them more resources to help them understand it? So I don't know if I'll talk about that or not, but that's what's got me up in arms lately.
Mm-hmm. Okay, is Chris still here?
I'm here, Bob. Thank you.
There you go.
Jackie, thank you so much. That was just fabulous. I know that um, even people who didn't ask questions are like cool and excited and waiting to hear what you're going to say next. I feel like you give hope to all of us who may not have attained the level that we may have wanted to attain so far. So we appreciate you for that. And thanks so much for being the star of our annual meeting.
Oh my gosh, it's my
Mhm.
honor. You guys are
Mhm.
family, so I enjoy doing this. And part of the thing that I wanted to do after retiring early was financial education, better investing, which is the organization that helped me the most in my early days. So it was an honor.
Awesome. And certainly the honor was all ours. Um, is there anything else that we need to do, Bob, or anybody
No,
before we allow people to get back to their evening?
I think we should thank our audience here tonight, our guests, for being
Absolutely.
here and helping
And
us
thanks,
celebrate our 6th anniversary.
yeah. And thanks to everybody who was taking care of the back room, all the people who are taking care of handling the questions and making sure that our logistics all worked properly. And yes, thank you everybody for tuning in and spending the evening with us and Jackie.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone.
Bye bye.